rent.
High rent.
The rent regime.
The Rent Act. 6 months rent advance.
Rent control office.
They didn't build their house thinking about you.
Imagine working all year, saving almost every cedi you earn, just to hand it over in a single day for a place you may not even love, but can't afford to lose. That's what most of you watching this video go through or are about to, including me. Let me continue by saying this. I don't live in Accra, Kumasi or Takoradi, but recently I got a reminder that rent struggles aren't just a big city problem. My rent was due, and while the amount wasn't exactly what people pay in Accra, the reality is, for the standard of living in my town, it still felt expensive, maybe too expensive. That's when it hit me. If rent here feels heavy, what must it be like for someone in the big cities paying double or triple just for a small room? And that's why I'm making this episode. Because the rent crisis in Ghana is not just about the cost. It's about outdated laws that don't protect tenants, the high cost of building, shady money laundering in real estate, political interest, the hassle of agents, and our refusal to use cheaper building methods. We are going to break it all down, how it's affecting ordinary people, how it's holding back our economy, and what real solutions could look like. Whether you live in the big city or a small town like mine, this is a storm that's already here, and it's only getting stronger. Now let's get into it. Before rent became this financial monster, it was actually much simpler. Back in the 70s and 80s, most landlords charged monthly or quarterly rent. Housing was cheaper and land was easier to get. But then came the economic crisis of the 80s and early 90s, which were high inflation, cedi depreciation, and a construction slowdown. Landlords realized that if they charge monthly, by the time the year ended, the value of their rent had dropped. So they started asking for a year's rent upfront, then 2 years, and sometimes even 3. Not because they were greedy at first, but because they were trying to lock in value before the cedi lost more worth. Over time, this became the normal way of renting in Ghana, even when inflation calmed down. By the 2000s, property demand in big cities exploded due to rural-urban migration, jobs being concentrated in cities, increased middle class, high housing deficit, and more inflow of expats. Landlords saw this demand and increased prices, knowing someone would always pay. And here's where it gets worse. Foreign investors and high-income expats started paying rent in bulk without blinking. That pushed prices up for everyone. Today, that same 2-bedroom house in Accra that cost about 200 cedis a month in 2005 can easily go for 1,200 to 2,000 cedis or more, and you must pay upfront for 2 years. If you were a landlord in that position, would you resist the temptation to charge that much, or would you follow the market? That's the hard question. Because once a system like this sets in, changing it isn't just about fairness, it's about breaking decades of habits. To really understand why rent is so high, you have to look at the cost of putting up a building in Ghana. Because sometimes, it's not just greed, the numbers themselves are brutal. Let's say you want to build a modest 2-bedroom house. Even before the first block is laid, you spend thousands on land alone. In some areas, a single plot in Accra can cost 80,000 to 1 million cedis. Then you add cement, which used to be around 30 cedis per bag in 2016, but is now hovering around 90 to 110 cedis. So if you need 200 bags for a full build at 90 cedis, that's 18,000 cedis just for cement. And we haven't even talked about iron rods, sand, wood, roofing sheets, tiles, plumbing, wiring, all of which have gone up thanks to inflation and a weak cedi. Labor costs are no joke either. Skilled workers are charging more because their own living costs are climbing. Here's where it hits tenants. A landlord who has invested over 1 million cedis in a property isn't going to charge you 30 cedis a month. They are going to set a rent that recovers their cost, often with hefty profit margin on top. But here is the question: should tenant be forced to shoulder all of that burden at once, with 1 or 2 years rent in advance? Or should the system find ways to spread the cost so people aren't drowning before they even move in? Because right now, the economics of building are creating a rental market where affordability isn't even in the equation. It's just about survival. Let's now continue with the law side of things. Because funny enough, Ghana already has a rule meant to protect tenants like you and me. The Rent Act of 1963 says landlords can't ask for more than 6 months rent in advance. 6 months. That's it. But when was the last time you actually paid just 6 months? Think about it. Most of us have handed over 1, 2, even 3 years upfront. The last time you rented, how many months did you pay? Drop it in the comments, because I'm curious if anyone watching has actually paid what the law says. It's like going to buy bread and the seller saying, "Sure, but pay for every loaf you eat for the next 2 years." Right now, you would laugh and walk away. Except with housing, you can't. You need a roof over your head, so you pay. And why this keeps on happening, you may ask? Because the rent control department, the body meant to enforce the law, is underfunded and overwhelmed. Landlords know there's little risk in breaking the rule. So while the law says 6 months, the reality is simple: pay what they ask, or start packing your bags. Now let's talk about the middlemen, the agents. In theory, they are supposed to make your search for a home easier. But in reality, many are just adding extra cost and pressure. Agents are the middlemen, sometimes licensed, often not, who claim to help you find a place. But for many tenants, dealing with agents feels like a second rent before you even move in. Here's how it works. An agent takes you to view a property, and before you can even step foot inside, you pay a registration fee, usually between 50 and 200 cedis. Now, whether you find a place through them or not, that fee is gone. If you actually find a place you like, there is a commission, often the equivalent of 1 month's rent, plus viewing fees if they are working with multiple landlords. And here's the frustrating part: some agents aren't even directly connected to the landlord. They are middlemen for another middleman. So you could end up paying fees to 3 or 4 different people just to reach the actual owner. Ever had an agent show you a completely different place than what was advertised? Or take you to see a room that's already been rented out? That's not just bad business. It's a system where there is no real accountability. And yet, agents thrive because the rental process is so informal. Most landlords don't list their properties publicly. They rely on word of mouth and agents. So if you want to find a place, you almost have no choice but to go through them. So you start your housing journey already financially drained before you've even paid the actual rent. Let's now pull back the curtain on something uncomfortable: the way some people use real estate to wash money in Ghana.
I think there's a lot of money laundering ending up, and I'm saying this without necessarily hardcore proof. But
I agree with you. I believe
using
it. I support you.
Economic numbers just on the over the table calculation, because the amount of houses that are not habited in Accra, people say $3,000 per month, and for 2 years nobody's in it. They are not buried,
And the bank is not going after them.
You understand? He built something 5-star thing and he's selling, is renting at such a fantastic price. If nobody goes, it's not concerned because it's a store of his value.
That's how it actually works. Someone has a large amount of money they can't explain, maybe from inflated government contracts, internet fraud, or other shady deals. Putting that money in the bank would raise questions, but if they invest it into building property, it suddenly looks legitimate. They start by buying land, often in prime areas where land alone can cost 200,000 to 1 million cedis per plot. Then they spend 2 million or more constructing a big apartment block or luxury home. On paper, it's now an investment. But here is the clever and damaging part. They don't actually need normal tenants. Instead, they rent out a few units or the whole property to associates who pay inflated rents, sometimes 15,000 to 30,000 a month, using the same illegal money in the clean form. The rent is documented as legitimate income, and now the dirty money has been laundered into the system. And because this cycle keeps the official rent prices for these properties ridiculously high, it pulls the whole market upwards. Suddenly, a regular 2-bedroom in the same area that should cost 1,200 now goes for 3,000 or more, because the market is chasing artificial prices set by people who aren't actually trying to make housing affordable. So the issue is, these buildings don't stay empty forever, but when they do get tenants, it's often part of the laundering process itself. And that's why even when supply looks like it's increasing, regular people still can't afford to rent.
In airport residential, there's a vacancy rate of 37%, to mean a third of the houses in that area are not occupied. They are empty. Cantonment, 30%. East Legon, 15%. And there is an oversupply of 3-bedroom units in the country and an undersupply of 1-bedroom units and chamber and hall, as you call it here. What does this mean? It means that in an economy where the average income is 1,280 and the cost of a new house to rent is 1,700 cedis, or rather 120,800 cedis to buy, the Ghanaians cannot afford. But the government says it's one.
So the question we need to ask is, how can ordinary Ghanaians compete in the housing market where some players aren't even playing the same game? One big reason rent keeps climbing is that we are stuck on just one way of building: concrete blocks, cement, iron rods, the expensive route. Yes, it's strong and familiar, but it's also draining pockets dry. If we take a look at the prices of the materials we mostly use to build in Ghana, the prices are constantly going up. Meanwhile, cheaper and equally durable options exist, like compressed earth blocks, prefab materials, bamboo reinforcement, or even recycled plastic bricks. This can cut construction costs greatly, which should make rent more affordable. But here's the problem. Many landlords and developers don't want to try them. Why? Some think it looks cheap or won't last, even though in countries like Rwanda and Kenya, people are building entire estates from these materials that meet all safety standards. Others simply follow tradition because this is how it's always been done. And so, instead of exploring cost-saving methods that could make rent reasonable, we keep pouring money into the most expensive option. And guess who ends up paying for that decision? It's us, the tenants. Now, if you are wondering why all this, the inflated rents, the unregulated agents, even the laundering schemes continues without serious reform, the answer often lies in politics. In Ghana, some of the biggest landlords and real estate developers are not just business people. They are politicians, political party financiers, or people with deep connections to power. And when the people who make the laws are the same ones benefiting from the loopholes, you can guess how fast those laws get enforced, or not enforced at all. Here's a reality check. In certain prime areas in Accra, whole apartment blocks are owned by individuals who either currently hold political office or have held it before. These properties can fetch rents of 10,000 to 30,000 a month for luxury units. And because the owners are politically connected, they face little to no scrutiny about where the money to build them came from. Have you noticed how rent control offices in Ghana seem powerless? That's not just underfunding, it's influence. If the person behind a property has the ear of the people in power, enforcement officers often look away. And here's the kicker. These political figures sometimes indirectly benefit from the high rent market. Why? Because inflated housing prices push more people into poverty, which in turn makes them more dependent on political promises during election seasons. It's a cycle that's not just about housing, it's about control. And until political will matches the scale of the problem, tenants will keep paying the price, literally and figuratively. When rent is too high, it doesn't just hurt individuals, it slows down the entire country. Let's start with the personal side. Imagine earning 3,000 a month and paying 1,000 in rent. That's 30% of your income gone before you even buy food, pay electricity, or probably send money home. It means fewer savings, no emergency cushion, and constant financial stress. Now multiply that by thousands of people in the same situation. That's millions of cedis that could be going into small businesses, investment, or even children's education. Instead, it's been tied up in rent payment. Think about the ripple effect. When people spend most of their income on housing, they buy fewer goods and services, which slows down the economy. Businesses face higher wage demands because workers need more money just to survive in cities. And when young graduates can't afford to live where the jobs are, we waste talent and potential that could be driving national growth. High rent also fuels inequality. Those who own property keep accumulating wealth, while those renting keep losing it. It's like running on a treadmill. You are sweating, but you are not moving forward. If you had an extra 300 to 500 cedis every month because your rent was reasonable, what would you do with it? Start a side hustle, save for a plot of land, or pay off debt faster. That's the kind of financial breathing space many Ghanaians are being denied right now. And that's why this rent crisis isn't just a personal problem, it's a national one. We've all heard the common solutions: enforce rent laws, build more affordable housing, educate tenants. But let's be real, if this were enough, we wouldn't still be here. So let's talk about solutions that could actually shake things up. 1. Salary-linked rent deductions for the formal sector. If you are on payroll in the formal sector, imagine having your rent automatically deducted from your salary every month, just like SNIT or your taxes. This guarantees landlords steady income and makes it easier for them to accept monthly or 6-month payments instead of demanding 2 years upfront. This system is already used in some countries and could be managed by banks or payroll agencies. 2. Decentralizing economic opportunities. Why are rents in Accra, Kumasi and Takoradi insane? Because that's where the jobs, contracts and industries are concentrated. If we aggressively spread economic activities, setting up government agencies headquarters, corporate offices, and manufacturing hubs in different places across the country, demand for housing in the big 3 cities will cool, reducing pressure on prices. Look at how Tema was intentionally developed to ease pressure on Accra decades ago. It worked, and we can do it again. 3. Public-private rent-to-own programs. Instead of just paying rent forever, tenants should channel their payment towards eventual ownership. For instance, a government-backed housing project could allow people to pay 800 to 1,000 cedis monthly for 10 to 15 years and own the property at the end. This way, rent becomes an investment and not a black hole. 4. Vacancy penalties for empty houses. Walk through East Legon, Airport Hills, or cantonments, and you see mansions sitting empty for years, often because owners are waiting for a high-paying expat tenant. A small annual vacancy tax would push owners to either lower rent, sell, or use the property productively. Even a 1 to 2% penalty on the property's value could make a landlord think twice about letting it rot. 5. Micro-housing and shared living incentives. Not everyone needs a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment. Developers could be incentivized to build smaller and well-designed units like studios, single rooms, with shared kitchens or co-living spaces. This reduces costs and offers more affordable entry point for singles and young couples. 6. Digital rental marketplaces with verified listings. A central, government-endorsed online platform where landlords list properties at legal rent rates with full transparency. Tenants could rate landlords, and listings that break the law could be flagged instantly. And I want to know, if you could have your rent automatically deducted from your salary, so you only pay small monthly amounts, would you try it? Or if the government moves your office to Sunyani or Tamale with the same pay you earn, would you relocate to enjoy cheaper rent, or would you stay in the city? Here's the truth. The rent crisis isn't some mysterious storm that came out of nowhere. It's the result of choices by landlords, agents, by policymakers, and by all of us staying quiet while the rules get bent or ignored. But just because it's been this way for years doesn't mean it has to stay this way. Imagine a Ghana where your rent is deducted monthly from your salary. Your job didn't change you to Accra or Kumasi because good paying work existed at different places. Paying rent for 10 years and ending up owning your home instead of starting over. These aren't fantasies. They are choices we could make if enough of us demanded them. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these solutions do you think would actually work in Ghana? And which one do you think would fail completely? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's see if you can spark a real debate. The rent crisis isn't just numbers on papers. It's people's lives, dreams, and futures at stake. If you believe this story needs to be heard, please share it. Thanks so much for watching to the end. And please subscribe to the channel for more stories on social issues that need attention, business, and entrepreneurship. This episode was presented by Abe Graham from Loom-Line, and I'll see you in the next one.